In the 8th year of our relationship, I took a knife from my doctor boyfriend, Ethan. He promised I could ask for any reward. Everyone assumed I'd use this as an opportunity to propose marriage. Instead, I calmly said, "Let's break up." I turned and left. Ethan chuckled dismissively and bet with the others, "She's just seeking attention. I bet, in less than 3 days she'll come crying begging me to get back with her." But he was wrong. Because I had a secret, I was reborn. In my previous life, my proposal was successful, but Ethan's white moonlight, Clara, jumped from the rooftop and committed suicide. He vented all his anger on me. On our wedding night, he slashed my face and imprisoned me in a dark, narrow basement. After I became pregnant, he forced me to eat excessive amounts of supplements every day. By the time I was in labor, the baby had grown so large that I couldn't give birth naturally. Ultimately, I hemorrhaged, tore apart, and died in childbirth. Now, I've been reborn, returning to the day I shielded Ethan from the knife. This time, I'll give him exactly what he wants. The sharp pain in my arm jolted me back to the present in the surgeon's office. A nurse finished wrapping the last layer of bandage, softly reminding me not to get it wet for the next few days. Ethan, sitting in his office chair, sneered, "It's just a scratch. Why are you acting so fragile now?" I didn't respond. The other doctors in the office exchanged subtle glances, their expressions telling. They had all witnessed the medical dispute. The knife-wielding assailant was a thug who'd been released from prison a few years ago. He was tall, burly, and had a face full of menace. The fruit knife that had been used on my arm was a foot long, leaving a gaping wound that required over 20 stitches. And the thug's original target had been Ethan's heart. My silence seemed to infuriate Ethan. His beautiful face turned cold, his gaze icy. "Ava, don't be so dramatic. I told you that since you saved me, you could ask for any reward. Are you still not satisfied? Why are you giving me that look?" At some point, our conversations, Ethan, my childhood friend, had become nothing but a superior's arrogance and disdain towards a subordinate. And all his tenderness was reserved for his white moonlight, Clara, the orphan he had sponsored during the flood relief. My gaze drifted from the pink bunny hair tie on his wrist. Suppressing the bitter ache in my heart, I looked up at him and asked with a smile, "Anything at all?" Ethan was momentarily stunned, something flickering in his eyes. He glanced at the hair tie, his eyes showing a brief hint of panic, but he quickly composed himself. He ground his back teeth, a sign of his annoyance, but finally nodded in resignation. "Yes." Some of Ethan's classmates, who were also doctors in the office, immediately began teasing him. "Then Dr. Ethan should just give himself to her." Others chimed in with laughter. "Yeah, Dr. Ethan, it's about time your 8-year run ended in marriage. I've already prepared my wedding gift. When are we having the banquet?" Listening to their banter, I was about to propose the breakup to Ethan when a nurse rushed in and exclaimed, "Dr. Ethan, it's terrible. Miss Clara is threatening to commit suicide." Another suicide attempt. If I remembered correctly, this was Clara's 108th attempt, just like the previous life. As soon as the nurse finished, Ethan bolted out the door. He arrived at the hospital rooftop. There Clara stood, eyes red and swollen, face pale and delicate. She was wearing Ethan's white shirt, which showed off her slender, fair legs. I suddenly remembered that she was also present during the medical dispute. While I was focused on protecting Ethan, he had been holding her tightly in his arms. She had emerged from Ethan's lounge that day wearing this very shirt, one that I had given Ethan. "Ava saved you from a knife, and you promised her she could ask for anything. Ava loves you so much, she will definitely ask you to marry her. And you will agree, right?" "I'm sorry, Ethan. Just the thought of losing you for the rest of my life is too much to bear. I'd rather die." Tears streamed down Clara's face, making Ethan's heart ache. Come down, and I'll explain." Ethan's voice was full of concern and pain. Ethan cared about everything Clara did. Ethan said that she was a young girl who loved pink, so the pink Dior bag that he had bought for my birthday became her reward for passing her college final exams. She was afraid of thunder, so on countless nights, one phone call was all it took for Ethan to rush to her side. Once, while attending my grandfather's funeral, there were no flights available. Hearing Clara's cries over the phone, Ethan had exploded at me. Why does she have to want to die on a day like this? I remembered when Ethan had confessed to me, promising he would always love me unconditionally. But when he met 18-year-old Clara at 26, all his love was given to her. In my previous life, I had let jealousy cloud my judgment, leading to my tragic end. This time I didn't want him anymore. Clara's frantic cries pulled me back to reality. She was rescued by Ethan. They embraced tightly, their lower bodies pressed together. I felt a sudden wave of nausea. Ethan, visibly shaken, trembled and repeatedly kissed the top of Clara's head. "I'm so glad you're okay," Clara cried, her whole body shaking. "Will you marry Ava? If you do, you might as well let me die just now." Ethan gently wiped away the tears on her cheeks, his gaze turning dark and sharp when he looked at me. "It's just a marriage. You'll always be first in my heart." Then, as if forced, he sighed and lowered his gaze, saying, "After all, Ava has been with me for 8 years. I don't love her anymore. But she saved me when I fell in the water all those years ago, and she has been like a devoted caregiver by my side. I need to repay that debt." His words stunned everyone in the room. Yes, I had saved Ethan when he fell into the water, and that had led to our relationship. But that was so long ago. He always thought I was using gratitude to demand things from him. But if I knew he'd become like this, I wouldn't have saved him then, nor would I now. Growing irritated by the pitying looks, I scoffed, "Ethan, I'm busy. When are you going to fulfill your promise?" Ethan smirked, a knowing look in his eyes. He said derisively, "So eager to marry me?" Then, he comforted Clara by softly stroking her earlobe before casually saying to me, "Fine. When do you want to get married? Since you are using all these tricks to try to marry me, I will." I cut him off quickly. "Let's break up." Realizing what I had said, Ethan's head snapped up. His eyes began to fill with astonishment and anger. "You want to break up?" Ignoring the surprise in Clara's eyes, I calmly looked at the scowling Ethan. "Yes. What trick is this?" Ethan refused to believe me. He said coldly, "Who doesn't know that you, Ava, have been sticking to me like a leech since high school? And now you finally see a chance to marry me, but you're saying you want to break up? Ava, stop deceiving yourself, okay? You're still wearing the ring I gave you." He seemed to have found my weakness, his face filled with pride, as if certain I could never leave him. I calmly took off the ring and tossed it off the rooftop. "I forgot, thanks for the reminder." It was a birthday gift that Ethan had bought with his first scholarship during our freshman year. It had our initials engraved on it. Once, after I had been in a car accident and was unconscious, I was gripping this ring tightly in my hand. Ethan knew how much I cared about him and how much I cared about this ring. But now I'd thrown it away. Ethan's brows furrowed, but he still didn't believe I would break up with him. He sneered, "Ava, I don't care what game you're playing, but let me tell you, if you apologize right now, I'll act like nothing ever happened. You still want to be Mrs. Ethan, I will still let you." I smiled faintly. "Ethan, I wish you and I that from now on, you get what you deserve." Then I turned and left. As I left, I heard Clara ask Ethan, "Aren't you going after her?" Ethan laughed coldly, "No. She'll come back like a good little dog. A woman who has used every method to get pregnant with my child won't be able to leave me." Yes, I was pregnant. That time, when Ethan and Clara were having a fight, he was drunk and took me for Clara and went crazy all night. Shortly after, I found out I was pregnant. Ethan knew this too. In my past life, I had used gratitude to get him to marry me. And after Clara committed suicide because of it, he constantly force-fed me. If I didn't eat, he'd force me. Over and over again until my belly grew bigger and bigger. When I went into labor, he didn't send me to the hospital. Until my baby was too big to deliver. I still remembered the pain of childbirth, so intense that my hands and feet were trembling. I was screaming, my eyes bloodshot. I tried my best, but I just couldn't give birth. In the end, I hemorrhaged and died. The blood poured from under me, covering the floor, and the baby stuck there died of suffocation. After returning home from the hospital, I touched the small life that was still fluttering inside me. I thought, it's time to end it all. I took a nap at home. It lasted 4 hours. After 4 hours, I received a message from Ethan. "My mom is sick. Come to my house." Ethan was a bastard. But his mother had always been genuinely good to me. My parents had been good friends with his parents. After my parents' passing, Ethan's mother treated me like her own daughter. But the person who sent the message did not sound like Ethan at all. I knew Ethan's texting habits well. He never used punctuation in his messages. This couldn't have been sent by Ethan. It was obviously his beloved Clara who had sent it. Only Clara had the audacity to touch Ethan's phone. Even knowing that it was a trap, I went. When I arrived at the Ethans, as soon as I opened the door, a bucket of ice-cold water was poured on me. The freezing chill enveloped me instantly, and my lower abdomen convulsed with pain. The originally quiet room exploded in laughter. When I opened my eyes, I realized the villa was filled with young men and women, who were looking at me with mocking looks. In the middle of them was Clara. Make her kneel. Immediately, someone kicked me in the back. Clara laughed scornfully. Do you know how much Ethan hates you? You bitch, you secretly got pregnant with Ethan's child behind my back. As she said this, she grabbed a bottle of liquor from the side. You slut. Always use your special tricks to trap Ethan around you. Today, I will make you regret getting pregnant with Ethan's child. Clara then lifted the bottle of liquor. Clara thought I'd be scared. But I wasn't scared at all. When Clara forced me to drink the liquor, I even drank it submissively. I finished the whole bottle of liquor. I didn't want Ethan anymore, and I didn't want this child anymore either. After drinking, I asked Clara, "Is there more?" Clara called me a psycho. Then she picked up a burning curling iron from the side. She lifted the curling iron and pressed it toward my eye. Just then someone shouted in horror, "Blood! She's bleeding a lot." The intense pain in my lower abdomen made my face as pale as paper. Clara seemed to remember something, only panicked for a moment, then became more ruthless. She threw the curling iron away, and before anyone could react, she stomped on my stomach. Blood instantly splattered everywhere. Before I could even scream, I passed out completely. In the hospital office, Ethan was reviewing a patient's file. Then, a nurse rushed in with an emergency surgery consent form. "Dr. Ethan, it's terrible, Ms. Ava." Ethan interrupted. "I already broke up with her. Don't mention her to me." The nurse looked extremely worried. "But she was just sent to the hospital in an ambulance. It's a critical emergency. She has severe bleeding from pregnancy. We need to call other hospitals for blood. You need to sign the consent form quickly." Ethan glanced at her with indifference, grabbed the consent form, and ripped it up in front of the shocked nurse. "Do you think I would believe such a pathetic lie?" Ethan sneered. "Ava is trying to buy off my people. Ava loves me so much, why would she lose my baby? I'm telling you, even if she was about to die, I would not sign this consent form." After saying that, he shook off the nurse's hand that wanted to pull on his sleeve and left. To prevent me from messing with him again, he turned on the Do Not Disturb mode. He played till 10 p.m., then turned off the Do Not Disturb mode. Instantly, over 100 missed calls popped up on his phone. Even the hospital's director had called him multiple times. He frowned in displeasure. That woman Ava was even bothering the director? She was getting more and more brazen. With that in mind, he called the director, wanting to apologize. The director only said coldly, "Get back to the hospital immediately," and hung up. Confused, Ethan drove to the hospital. But he didn't notice Clara's pale and uneasy expression in the passenger seat. Ethan was always praised by the director. This was the first time he'd been scolded by the director. He wanted to find Ava and settle this with her. When he stepped out of the elevator, someone slapped him in the face. Ethan raised his hand to strike back, but he saw that the person who hit him was his mother. He was stunned. "Mom? Why are you here?" His mother's eyes were red and swollen, and she almost yelled at Ethan. "You beast! Why didn't you sign the consent form? Do you know because of you, Ava had a miscarriage with heavy bleeding, and wasn't rescued in time. They had to remove her uterus." Before Ethan could react, a police officer stepped forward, showing a video from a cell phone. In the video, my white dress was dyed red. I was lying on a stretcher unconscious. The amount of blood was so large that even the stretcher was stained red. At the sight of it, Ethan's pupils contracted. The officer's next words seemed to nail Ethan to the spot. Mr. Ethan, we've found in our investigation that the main culprit who harmed your fiancé is your companion, Miss Clara. What? Ethan was completely stunned, his beautiful face filled with disbelief and terror. How could Ava have a miscarriage? She loves me so much. She wants to marry me so much. How could she let herself lose her child? This is not real. It's not real. The director, seeing his nearly fainted mother, told the nurse to support her. He then walked to Ethan and said with disappointment, Ava was injured while trying to protect you. This is how you repaid her. You have really disappointed me. From now on, you are suspended from your job. This hospital does not need such a cold-blooded wolf in sheep's clothing. Ethan's face was pale. He ignored the director's suspension. He grabbed the nurse who had asked him to sign the form and asked, Where is Ava? Where is she? The nurse shook off Ethan's hand with disgust and said coldly, Miss Ava was brutally kicked in the stomach. Not only was her uterus completely damaged, but even her internal organs were injured. Because the blood wasn't delivered in time, she was at one point given a death certificate. Now she's clinging to life and is in intensive care unconscious. Ethan's lips trembled. His eyes were red as he rushed to the intensive care unit. Ava, you can't die. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have. Slap another sharp slap across the face. His mother roared at him. You monster. What were you doing before? Why didn't you act earlier? Ethan was dazed and confused. He unconsciously replied, Be before I. Ethan stuttered, wanting to defend himself, but he couldn't say anything. Just then, Clara was being controlled by the police. Her eyes were tearful, and her pair of innocent eyes were looking at Ethan, trembling as she asked for help. Ethan, save me. She only had the Ethan who cherished her in her eyes. Perhaps the 4 years of favoritism she received gave her the illusion that whatever she did to me could be forgiven. This was only making me lose my uterus and my child. It wasn't a big deal. I was an orphan who was raised by my grandfather. As long as Ethan helped her, the police would be helpless. With this in mind, Clara's eyes flashed with triumph. When she saw Ethan staring straight at her, she thought he was thinking of a way. She squeezed out a few more tears, her expression becoming more pitiful. She bit her lips as she sweetly asked for help. Ethan, I'm scared. She knew that Ethan in the past could not resist her when she was like this. Because Ethan had said she was most like his impression of 18-year-old Ava when she was like this. Sure enough, Ethan moved. Save me, I'm innocent. Clara was full of expectations, but in return, Ethan kicked her in the stomach, causing her face to pale in pain. Clara, why? Ethan was like a raging beast. Because his beloved treasure had been destroyed. He went completely hysterical. Why would you hurt her? Clara panicked, but she quickly recovered. She cried more intensely. I'm sorry, Ethan. Because Ava was calling me a whore for seducing you. Ava even said that she was going to kill me. I was so scared. I didn't intentionally kick her. I'm sorry, punish me as you wish. And I'm willing to go to jail as punishment. As long as you are willing to forgive me, I'm willing to die as an apology. She took advantage of the police not paying attention and quickly ran towards the wall, head first. Ethan, who realized what she was doing, pulled her into his arms. His anger had already dissipated when Clara spoke. Kicking her was only for show for the police. Yes, Clara was such a pure and innocent girl. It must have been Ava who had bullied her. That is why she was retaliating. With that in mind, Ethan was scared. He hugged Clara, comforting her. Don't be scared, Clara, I misunderstood you. Don't worry. I'll hire the best lawyer to defend you. Clara's eyes flashed with satisfaction, as she buried her head in Ethan's chest and choked. Thank goodness for you. For days after the incident I woke up. Ethan's mother told me everything. Ethan ignored her objections and continued to protect Clara. He even blacklisted her and Ethan's father. Even though he had been suspended from the hospital, he had hired the best lawyers to defend Clara. Ava, we are so sorry. Don't worry, I will even sacrifice my old life to get justice for you. Ethan's mother looked like she had aged almost 20 years. Ethan's father's hair had turned white in just one night. But I was very calm. The tragic ending of my previous life made me dislike the thought of having kids. Now that I had lost my fertility, maybe it wasn't that bad. I laid weakly in my hospital bed and croaked at Ethan's mother. "Thank you, Mrs. Ethan." The use of Mrs. Ethan made Ethan's mother almost pass out, because for the past 20 years, I had been calling her Mom. She understood. No matter how hard they tried, I would never go back to Ethan. On the day I was discharged, Ethan's father and mother submitted a thick pile of evidence to the police, and they officially filed a lawsuit against Clara. Ethan was a well-known handsome doctor online with millions of fans. To help Clara win the lawsuit, he went online and exposed a large amount of dirt about me, making me, while I was still unconscious, become known as a disgusting woman who was obsessed with engaging in female rivalry with innocent young women. Thus, when the case went to court, the courtroom was full. I was pushed into the courtroom in a wheelchair by Ethan's mother. When Ethan and I made eye contact, he pursed his lips, his expression stiff. His mother told me that he deeply believed Clara's words, and always thought that she was retaliating in self-defense when she hurt me. I knew, because before the trial, Ethan had sent me a message. "My parents are old and senile, that's why they're fooled by a wicked person like you. I've asked the people that were there. It's because you slapped Clara first, that's why she pushed you. It was you who was unlucky and fell on a bottle. It had nothing to do with Clara." I was not angry. I only replied, "You're sick and you need help." Ethan was so angry that he blacklisted me. The trial started. Clara was acting as weak and pitiable as always, standing in the dock trembling with tears in her eyes. This made the audiences pity her. Ethan also submitted the witness statements from everyone who was there, saying that Clara was innocent. He even tried to use the power of public opinion. He created a poll, using his account, and almost 1 million netizens believed that Clara was innocent. With the support of the public, Ethan and Clara seemed to be certain that they would win. While on our side, Ethan's parents only glanced coldly at their son and submitted a USB drive to the lawyers. The lawyer showed the video from the USB drive in court. After one glance, Clara almost fainted. In the video, it showed her kicking me in the stomach. Looking at the video, Clara, who was still kicking me even though my dress was stained with blood, made Ethan go crazy. The whole online world and the audience went crazy. Clara screamed, "It's fake. It's all fake." At that moment, a simple girl came to the witness box. She was one of the people Clara had found to teach me a lesson. But she did not do anything. She just recorded the video. The video was provided by me, and I'm willing to take responsibility for the authenticity of the material. The girl spoke in a low voice, her eyes full of hatred when she looked at Clara. When she contacted Ethan's mother, she had only said one thing. "Clara bullied my sister," which resulted in her jumping from a building. Besides this concrete evidence, Ethan's parents had used their connections and found the truth about how Clara's parents died in the flood. Her parents wanted her to apologize to the poor girl, who she had bullied. Before the flood, she gave her parents a large dose of sleeping pills and escaped quietly. The girl who she bullied and caused mental health issues was the girl's good friend. Clara was dumbfounded. Ethan was in shock. Ethan's parents had almost stripped Clara bare. Besides bullying her classmates, she was also materialistic and vain. After being sponsored by Ethan, she started to splurge. Whenever Ethan was on a business trip, she would use Ethan's credit card to buy off her classmates. She even brought them to underground casinos. She collaborated with the casino owner and brought classmates who were relatively well off to the casino. And after these classmates got addicted to gambling, she would receive 10% of the money they lost. This was also why, the day she bullied me, she had so many friends around her. They were all poor students who were being controlled by her, through her threats of exposing their gambling habits. When all of this was exposed, the online world exploded. The underground casino was directly shut down. It was said that the casino owner had put a bounty on her hands of $1 million on the dark web. What made the audience feel even more shocked was that Clara was a gambling addict who was $10 million in debt. And while she was seeing Ethan, she also had ambiguous relationships with 7 married or attached rich kids. After the explicit photos were released, Clara collapsed on the audience's seat. Ethan, who had a green hat over his head, turned pale. He ground his teeth as he glared at Clara. "You bitch!" After the trial was over, Clara's reputation was completely ruined. She was sentenced to 5 years for multiple crimes. The others who were involved with this case, or other cases, were all sentenced to prison. Ethan did not commit any crimes, but he lost his job. He became a disgusting scumbag that everyone on the internet was scolding. And I had become the most beautiful ex-wife that the whole internet was sympathizing with. After Clara was sentenced, Ethan became a stain that I couldn't get rid of. His parents were too disappointed in him and cut off all ties with him. He kept changing numbers to apologize to me. No matter how many times I blacklisted him, he'd still call. Until the day before I was going abroad, the buyer of my school district contacted me. He said there was a man who said he was my fiancé squatting outside his house and wouldn't leave no matter how much he was chased away. I had no choice but to meet Ethan. When I arrived, he was dirty. He looked like he hadn't been taking care of himself for a long time. He lost a lot of weight with dark circles under his eyes. His hair was greasy. When he saw me, his eyes instantly turned red. He was standing there like a child who had done something wrong. "Ava." His voice was raspy. His mother had told me that after he had been kicked out of his house, he became a pest that was being cursed at online. Someone had put medicine in his drink and ruined his voice. When I heard this, I didn't have any expression. It was the same now. "Don't stay here anymore. It will disturb other people." Ethan started to cry, tears streaming down his face. "I was wrong, wife, I'm so sorry. But why did you have to sell this house? This place had so many good memories of us." I smiled. Ethan thought I had changed my mind. He froze with tears in his eyes. But the next second I said, "For you, they might be good memories, but for me, the things you did to hurt me will only make this once wonderful house feel more like hell." Ethan was like he had been struck by lightning. He hunched his tall frame, as if he had completely lost all hope. I sighed and lost the last of my patience. "Please be nice and don't disturb me again. I really detest you." With that sentence, Ethan was sentenced to death. After that day, Ethan never showed up again. After I finished my studies abroad, I returned 6 years later. I had stayed in contact with Ethan's parents these past few years. I returned this time to take care of them in their old age. Maybe they were disappointed in their son. They had adopted another daughter a few years ago. She was very well behaved, sensible, and kind. With their daughter by their side, Ethan's parents had cheered up. They even looked younger. I really liked this sister. She had just got first place in her final exams. I promised to buy her a puppy as a reward. There was a pet shop right outside the complex. My sister was too overwhelmed with the choices, so I waited outside since I was allergic to cats. That was when I saw a man giving medicine to a patient in a small clinic next door. He looked familiar, but there was a hideous scar on his face, and his left leg seemed to be injured. I turned around subconsciously, but at the moment he met my gaze, he covered his face and scrambled away. I was confused. A pet shop employee was kind enough to explain to me, "That's Uncle Mute. He just opened a small clinic next to our shop last year. He was a doctor in the past, but he did something wrong and was fired. He's a really good doctor, but it's like his voice is ruined. Oh, last year he married a woman who had just got out of prison. Her face is ruined. Seems she did too many bad things. They are really strange. They fight and argue all day long. Sometimes they even fight with knives. Uncle Mute always calls her a disgusting whore and a jinx. That she was the reason he became so miserable." The employee was rambling on, but I didn't say anything. My sister came out with a puppy. I went inside to pay. But after paying, I heard my sister scream. I rushed outside and found that my sister was uninjured. But at the small clinic next door, someone was killed. I quickly covered my sister's eyes. Inside the clinic, a crazed thug was stabbing the man under him with a knife. The man who was lying in a pool of blood was Uncle Mute, the disfigured Ethan. The thug was mad. After stabbing Ethan over a dozen times, he pulled out the bloody fruit knife and walked toward Clara, who was a few meters away, and was completely terrified. A week later, the police released a notice. Ethan and Clara were both killed in the attack. The cause of death was medical violence. Ethan had prescribed the correct medicine for the thug's wife. But because Clara had argued with the thug's wife when they were buying vegetables at a market stall, and had also slept with the thug, she intentionally swapped the medicine when the thug's wife had come in to get her injection. In the end, the thug's wife died when she got home. She was also pregnant with a child. The baby was the son that the thug had wished for so many years. That was why the thug was mad. After Clara had sent a message to his wife, taunting her for being an old hag that couldn't keep her man, the thug picked up the fruit knife that was on the side. His eyes bloodshot as he walked towards Ethan's clinic. The inn.